Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, and joining me this morning, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning,
So,
everyone.
sorry we were not available last week, but we're continuing our journey on the lines of the I-ching, and the line that we're on is line 4. So, what can you tell us about line 4, Hartwell?
Well, let's just recap for a second. We're using the house metaphor, which is common in human design, as a metaphor for understanding the lines. The first line, first line was the foundation. The second line was the first story windows. The third was the transition. The fourth line is the foundation of the second floor. So in some ways, it shares some similarities with the one, but it's a foundation of a different kind. So what the 4 represents is, well, the 3 was concerned with material resources and bumping into things and making mistakes and finding out what doesn't work. So it was all about a relationship with the material world. The 4th line is about human resources rather than material resources. So this is a line that has a lot to do with community.
So that mean I can run around and bump into people? No, just kidding.
Well, it means it happens, but it happens anyway. It happens automatically.
I was being silly, though.
Yeah. So the 4 is about externalizing the truth of what's been discovered by the 3. So it has the potential to be deeply influential, but only in relationship to its own community. Okay. There's an innate friendliness to this line, a kind of a brotherhood, sisterhood sort of vibe, which inclines the 4s towards networking, towards relationship, influence. The 4th line can be very influential amongst its friends and amongst its network, but its influence that's where its influence is powerful, not to strangers, for instance. Quality of life is in proportion to your network. So if you're a 4-6 or a 1-4 or a 4-1 profile, these are the common profiles with the 4. Then your quality of life is in direct proportion to the quality of your network. And that's where all your opportunities arise. So work opportunities arise from networks as well. So when we think of that phrase, it's not what you know, but who you know, that would be specifically appropriate to some people with 4th line profiles.
Yeah, or you're the sum of the 5 people that you hang around the most. So your network. Yeah.
Sure, exactly. So people are the biggest decisions in your life for a 4 revolve around people and networks. If you, for some reason, leave or are kicked out of or somehow are without your network, then the most crucial thing is to develop a new network. Life happens for the 4 within networks, and that's pretty much what it requires. The 4 is, it has an innate sense of friendliness to it, an innate sense of warmth to it. It can be influential. If you're going to expand your network, you should expand your network through your network, so to speak. Like have people introduce you to other people, people you already know, introduce you to help you widen your network.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, and that's how most networking takes place anyways, right?
That's
Yeah.
sort of the definition of networking, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the fours are the networkers. They're the warm and open hearted people. Um, they, they kind of have this benefactor energy. Benefactor
Hmm.
slash dependent energy can be a theme.
Hmm.
Kindness and meanness can be a theme.
What do you mean when you say kindness, meanness? Do they have two sides of a personality, or what are you meaning by that?
Well, in the gene keys depth, for instance, the
Hmm.
four is the heart chakra. The four is very, very open. But if something disappoints you, then it smacks closed like a clamshell.
Oh,
And
this is what
so,
we were talking about, like the ice queen. So, you're in love with somebody until something happens, and then when they betray you or treat you in a way that is not very loving, then you can shut down and like cut them off. That's it.
right, there's a
I'm done.
frigidity there,
Yeah.
and it's like the coldness is equal to the warmthness that you once felt. And
Ah.
so that can be an experience too.
Hmm.
Um, it's like an open closed experience with the four.
So you're either
Uh,
all open or all closed. There's no like middle ground. Is that what you
kind
mean?
of, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so they're interesting that way,
Hmm.
and really, when the four is closed, it feels like there is no way in. It's like it's a
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah, it is. I have force. I can relate to that, especially when a relationship is over, like it's done, right? And then I remember you actually, to take this a little bit farther, when we were talking about the Venus sequence, right?
Yes.
And then also, okay, well, what's your way through that, like that experience? And it was to soften, right?
Yes.
So when
Yes.
you feel that coldness or that, you know, door shutting, then how can I soften into that? Right.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, at one level, the four might say, "Well, I'm closed off for a reason. I don't want this person in my life."
Hmm.
And so there'd be no reason there. But
Hmm.
some of the defense mechanisms that can arise in us arose when we were much younger, right? They're defense
Hmm.
patterns, and they don't always serve us. So
Hmm.
then we do need to have a strategy for, if there's reason
Hmm.
to use a release mechanism, which would be to soften.
Yeah, I think, and then I think if you take that into like business relationships or other types of relationships other than a personal one. So, like if you're, you can cut that person off if it's personal, but if it's business, you may still need to um, move forward with that and learn how to soften so that you can keep going with the business type thing, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I could see where there'd be situations where you would, need to soften in, and then also need to, say, this is my discernment. I don't need this anymore. Right.
Right.
So there's two
And so
sides
that
to it.
softening and gentling piece becomes a way for you to navigate for yourself,
Hmm.
first, and I mean also for potentially for the sake of others. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's like sometimes when we get triggered into our defense mechanisms, we do need to know how to come back from that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
I thought this was interesting because you had written, may abdicate a community if there is resistance or not enough return on an investment. So I thought that was really that was really an interesting statement. So like if you're with a group of people and you don't feel connected or that there's any exchange, then this type of person would go off and find another group of people because that networking is so important to their design.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we could brainstorm, or we could probably theorize about what might cause that to happen at certain points. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a very painful experience for somebody who had a 4 in their major, profile.
Right. But also in business, I can see that, right? Oh, I'm in this group, right? I've got this network going, but I'm not getting enough out of it. So I'm going to go find somebody who can help me more. Right. So yeah, because I can see that. Like I happen to know some people who are 4/6s or have a 4 in their profile, and I can see that playing out in real life. Right?
Okay.
Where they're part of the
Excellent.
community, but aren't getting enough of a return for their business to function, so they go somewhere else.
Yeah. So because of that connection to the heart and that connection and the importance of community, there can be a real fragility there for the 4. They're as strong as their connection to their community. They're not really, they don't really, in that way, they're not independent kind of people, although they might have other things in their design that incline towards that independence or connectivity.
So what would be the connection? So there's also a channel of community in the human design chart. So how would that play out with this line 4? Like if you because you can either have both or not have one or the other, I'm assuming, right?
You could have both, neither, or one. Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah. So would that amplify that need for that connection, that networking, that community, if you have the channel of community?
It would be, in some ways it would, in a sense, reinforce a theme. And I mean, in human design, in astrology, usually if there's a powerful theme showing up, then it's going to be reinforced, but in more than one way.
Right.
Now, when we're talking about, we can talk about the 4 in a couple of different ways, Kris. We can talk about it as in, do you have it as part of your profile?
Right.
Because that's the way you show up in the world. That's kind of like your costume. And so that's a very important place to have a 4. So if you're the 4/6, for instance, then all the themes we're talking about are going to be very strong.
But you can also have it in an 8, right?
You can. Say you have you don't have it in your profile, but you have it in a lot of gates. Then that's going to be another thing. And I mean, the channel of community is part of the tribal circuitry. And the tribal circuitry is all about sharing and mutual support. So yes, it certainly does sort of reflect the 4 theme. They're operating on different levels, but I mean, certainly if you saw somebody who had the channel of community and 4 in their profile and then it would reinforce the theme. But then of course you can have opposing themes too. So for instance, you have the channel of community, but you have gate 21, which is all about needing to be independent. So even though it's a tribal gate, just like the channel of community is a tribal channel, you like to manage the resources for your community, but you like to do it off on your own. That could be, so the complexity arises in that way.
It's my sandbox.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
it's kind of like a, what do you call that? Paradox, like where, in
human design language, we sometimes use the term design dilemma.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of us have these design dilemmas. Like I'm very tribally oriented, and yet I've got the three out of 3 gates of aloneness.
Yeah.
And I'm off I'm off with all my ones doing being investigative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I
So,
have four of the aloneness. Yeah. It's like, it's interesting, like, because that's the other thing that you noted in here. The aspiration is aloneness. So the aspiration is to be alone and be self-sufficient.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Instead of having to always rely on others. But I imagine it's one of those design dilemmas, because the four is, I want to be part of a team, part of a community and network, but I want to be alone. So it's like kind of opposite that way.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so it takes some sophistication to kind of articulate what's going on for a person. And
Mhm.
of course, a person living their own design is always going to be the authority on their own design.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about, like, so you've got here how you connect and how to establish security. And again, it feels like there's this push pull or this, paradox going on where there's both ends of the spectrum. Can you explain those two a little bit more?
Well, how you connect, the theme would be to be a confidant with somebody.
Hmm.
But when it's not working, it's not working. And so, um, it's kind of an on-off switch, if you want to put it that way. It's kind of like if you were to say, thinking about the connection theme of the three,
Hmm.
um, let's see if I can just put my
It
you know
seems
the
like, go ahead.
so for instance, the emotional approach to situations for a four would be kindness versus meanness, being closed off, whereas the theme for a three shows up as allegiance versus rejection, which has a different flavor to it.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
like, what I was going to say is, like, when you're talking about how to connect and be a confidant or not, it's almost like there's a discernment that takes place, and, oh, I can connect and I can go deep with this person. And then there's other people where right away you feel like this isn't a person that I want to go deep with, or that, I'm able to go to that depth, right? Like,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
energetically, you can feel it, I guess is
Sure,
what I'm saying.
sure,
Like,
absolutely.
so this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then the security is benefactor and dependent. So that almost seems like that push pull between um, being of service, right? And then being the person who is being served.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, that's kind of how the themes of security show up for you. And I mean,
Mhm.
it when you look at only one at a time, it kind of like it makes you kind of feel puzzled. But if you are studying all the lines at the same time, then you begin to say, "Oh yeah, that's a much different flavor than this,"
Well,
and you get to
yeah, it's that paradox. You can see that all the way through the theme of having both ends of the spectrum. And I think that when we were talking with our mentor before, at one of the lectures, and it was like how there was two ends of the spectrum, right? There was depression, and then on the other side, it's expression. So
yeah.
it's like you've got this push pull going on all the time with these, is what I see. Yeah.
Well, and we know as you're bringing up our mentor, she's a 4-6,
Hmm. Yeah.
and so is one of our fellow mentees.
Hmm.
So um, very different ways of. I guess the profile makes most sense for me because that's where its biggest impact will be. If you have one of these lines in your profile,
Hmm.
that's where the biggest impact is going to come from. Um, you can be tremendously independent, and yet the way you interface with the world is going to be very profoundly affected by your profile. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're a 1-3, so we talked about the 3 last time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a 5-1, so we're going to be talking about the 5 next week.
Mm-hmm.
It flavors things a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at individual lines, sometimes you'll get the feeling, I mean, you have 3/4 lines in your profile. I mean, in your overall chart,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's funny that you say it's not a lot, but I feel it. I can feel it strongly play out in my life.
okay.
Yeah, because I can relate to that. But again, that's relating. Then you connect it to your Venus sequence, right? So in my Venus sequence, it's very prevalent. 2 out of the 4 of them are line 4. So when it comes,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So you know what I mean. So I think that there's like layers to it. So when you're dealing with love and relationships in your Venus sequence, whichever line is more prevalent, you're going to notice when it comes to that theme in your life, right? Because I noticed that the 4 in my relationships and I can feel it, right?
Okay.
Especially with, that disappointment and betrayal and how that switch works in me. I can feel
Mm.
that most definitely. Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's a
yet in my
very
design, I don't have that many 4s. So it's
right.
interesting.
But 2 of them
Mhm.
land in a fairly significant place. Yeah, that's
Right.
intriguing.
Yeah.
Thank
Hmm.
you for bringing up that point.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's all these so many layers, so many layers.
Yeah. Whereas you
Um,
have quite a few. You have 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have any in my Venus sequence per se. So, I mean, I can't say that I feel that theme that strongly in my own personal psychology.
Hmm.
Um, I could maybe make an argument for feeling it in the area of relationships and sexuality. It's kind of
Well,
like you're open to something and then it's like, okay, this is a no-fly zone. There's no, when somebody goes cold towards you in an interpersonal relationship, it's just that it feels like there's no way beyond that.
hmm,
Yeah, so that could be a 4 experience for sure.
yeah. And I would think too, though, also the side of, being part of a network, being part of a team, being part of a community, you would definitely feel like in a group setting, if you were on the outside versus on the inside, then you would feel that as well, right? Like, because if your design is to be networking and to be part of a network,
Hmm.
right, and you're on the outside, then that's what I was saying. Then if they're not getting their results or doing what, that networking is supposed to do, they're going to go find another community, right? I imagine
Yeah,
it
it
would be
would
felt
be,
that way.
if you had a 4 in your profile, it would be an imperative to kind of, um, it would be a powerful need.
Yeah. And then want to be alone, which I think is hilarious. It's like, I want to be part of this group, but I just want to be left alone to do my own thing, right? It just seems
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
no wonder we're so complicated. Anyways,
And that's why, in human design, you can get lost in all the complexity of your own chart.
mhm.
But, the first thing and the thing to be returning to over and over again is, are you following your decision-making strategy?
Yeah, and I think that it's important to know your design, but I'm finding value in knowing other people's designs. And then it starts being, oh, I know what role I play in that person's life, or I don't play, or I know why we have the interactions that we have, right? You know, it's quite interesting when you start looking at it from that point of view.
Yeah, it can give you a way to understand and process your experience with interpersonal experiences in a way that maybe um, helps you do that more quickly.
Yeah.
Come to a point of forgiveness, or come
Mm-hmm.
to a point of, oh, this person isn't right for me.
Mm-hmm.
Come to a place where you can make the discernment that you need to make more
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to tell us about line 4 before we wrap up here? We're a little bit over.
No, I would say that's about it. The
Yeah.
only thing, for those of you who have been following us for a while, quite soon we will be announcing and making available my online astrology course and my online human design course, which is currently in progress, but it's going to be available for people to subscribe to online and go through the course on their own. So that's an exciting development that will be coming up in the fairly near future.
Mm-hmm. As well, I wanted to mention there's a couple new types of readings that are coming out, and I believe you're going to be part of one of those, the Brood of Dragons.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
we kind of
Yeah.
um, there's some of us around our Clair-i-tea community who really enjoy the idea of dragons, and so we're come up with some fun and powerful readings to do with that kind of theme. And so look for that.
Yeah, and it's with groups. So, and we always have people like, what can I do as a group? So these are kinds of things. I think it deals with the dynamics within the group. So if you have a
Yes,
group of
yes.
people, and it will be a limited time thing, so make sure you watch for it if you want to take advantage of it with a group of friends or family or something. Like, just watch so
It's
that you
kind of
can
like,
get it.
sitting with a group of people and saying, okay, what is so and so's role within this group? What do
Yeah.
they offer, and what do they need? And
Hmm. How will they be
this, I
changed?
think,
Yeah.
yeah, as
Yeah.
we move into the future, I think this is something that's going to be much more.
Hmm.
We're moving into a time where community and the way that we show up as part of a collective and part of whatever grouping that we're part of is so important, so
Hmm.
significant.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that, Hartwell. And with that, we'll say God bless. And we love you. Have a great day. And we'll see you next week for line 5. Bye now.